Well, gentlemen, this week we cover a story that is very, very close to home for many people. We're talking about the sexual abuse story that came out of St. Mike's College School a couple of weeks ago, where it began with a video, and then it went to more videos, and then it went to a number of kids being suspended or expelled. And now, gentlemen, we have 6 high school students that have been charged.
More than 50 witnesses have been identified, and more information comes to us daily. We also know there are several videos being circulated. We are in possession of these videos. We have reason to believe that there may be more videos and more incidents.
First of all, I mean, all of us have attended high school. We've all seen different levels of bullying in school. For me personally, it blows my mind that something like this is still happening, because I was under the impression that bullying was something that we've really started to nail down on and to make sure that it didn't happen. But I guess in some ways, what we're doing is making sure that kids that do it don't get away with it. And in this case, it looks like these kids aren't getting away with it.
Bullying, to me, is when you go after somebody who's perceived to be weaker, which is certainly wrong in its own right. This is hazing, where you're going after people as an initiation ritual. And this is the type of thing that was very common. We hear about it in the States, in fraternities, and it's been around in sports teams forever. And often you hear about things like forcing kids to drink or things like that. But this seems to really take it to a whole new level. And I know in recent years there's been a lot of efforts to prevent this, and schools have taken a very strict approach to stopping it. And here we have really hazing taken to the extreme.
Does this make a difference in a court of law, Scott, if it is considered hazing versus bullying, because it's not personal against that kid in particular? It's just what we do, say the kids.
No, the criminal law does not concern itself with the motivation of the actor. It's concerned with the state of mind of the actor and the physical act. And in this case, there is, on the allegations, no question that violence was perpetrated on a person who was not consenting. It was of a sexual nature. It offended their sexual dignity, and that it was done intentionally. So, no, the motive of it, of the actor, does not matter to whether or not they're guilty. It could matter for properly understanding the moral fault of them, for understanding the role of the group dynamic brought to the situation that brought them before the court. It could, it may change the way that their apology rings. It may inform their likelihood of reoffending. They could, for instance, on these allegations, argue, no, we're not sex offenders, we're not sexual deviants. We were really violently gross and offensive, but it's not our true colors. I'd like to think they would argue that, and that they are not, that this is an aberration and not their real character. But the short answer to your question is no.
Scott, I just want to follow up on something you said, because you mentioned the word consent. And obviously, we all know that when looking at sexual crimes, generally, to prove them, there has to be a lack of consent, with certain other exceptions based on the age of the victim or complainant. But if it's in the context of a sports team, and the deal is you need to consent to this or you're not on the team, but they still go, and I'm not saying this is what happened here at St. Mike's, but they still go and say, okay, I'm willing to consent to this hazing behavior in order to be a part of this group. Could we make an argument as defense lawyers that vitiates the consent, or still, well, the consent was there?
Very good argument. It's vitiated on that circumstance. The group dynamic, the violence and lack of the fact that this person's being held down, it doesn't have any of the elements of consent. I only mentioned consent because the lack of it is an element of the offense. I didn't mention it to put it in play here.
Well, looking at that specific video, and none of us have seen it, but I agree with you in that. This is not a situation where consent can be argued. But what about the other hazing type rituals, whatever they might be?
Well,
drink this, or get
that's
paddled
the thing,
on the bottom.
Because if the kids know going in that this is part of it. It's always been part of it. Going in that to make the team, you're going to have to go through this hazing. If you don't want to go through the hazing, then you're just don't be on the team.
Well, I just can see an argument there that
Interesting.
by joining the team, by saying I'm willing to go through the hazing ritual, there's an element of consent, even if deep down they don't want to do it and they don't want to go through it. They still want to be there. So maybe we need an amendment to the code.
I don't really agree with you, because in order for consent to exist, it has to be informed consent. And the idea that it was explained to this young man, we're going to hold you down, spread your buttocks, and penetrate you with a wooden stick.
No, Scott.
It's absurd that
Separate
would
this
do.
situation. This situation, there was no consent. But what about a situation where you're just
Like going
smacking somebody on the bottom, or going streaking, or have to drink 5 beers if the person's willing to do it to get on the team, but they're told if you don't do it, you're not on the team? Is there still consent there?
There can be. This is over the line so much. I don't think we have to go there. I don't think forcing someone by peer pressure to drink beer is in any way the same thing at all.
So how do we prevent that? Do we need an amendment
You don't
to
need
the
to
code?
Well,
don't
maybe
need to
we need the
prevent
kids
that.
if
need
they
to-
know ahead of time that this is part of the ritual. I mean, that's the other thing too. We don't know if these kids knew ahead of time that, okay, today's Tuesday. I know today's the day they're going to do this to me because it's part of making the team. And if they did know it, why they didn't go to their parents or the principal or someone. But again, that all comes down to peer pressure, which brings us right back to where we were 30 years ago, where kids were afraid to speak up about being bullied because they don't want to be outed.
This came out because of a video.
That's
this
another
kid was
thing.
not coming forward. That's a horrible pressure situation they find themselves in.
Right. If there was no video, we may not know anything about this, right? I mean, these kids, and again, this is not saying it's consent. It's saying that these kids were almost resigned to the fact that they knew they were going to have to go through this as badly as they didn't. But if they wanted to make the team, this is what they were going to have to do.
But then they go through it as juniors, and then eventually they become the seniors, and because they did it, they go and do it themselves.
Which
So
really
it's-
scares you
well,
to
it's
think
part
of
of
how
the
long this has
culture.
been going on. And I mean, yes, hazing's been going on for years, but this particular type of hazing, which to me goes well beyond hazing. Like you said, hazing is having a guy streak or drink a few beers or do something silly.
Well,
But to
I don't like
physically-
that either, though.
Well,
I think,
I'm not saying it's
yeah.
good, but I'm saying it's not even comparable to having a broom handle stop inside of you like that. I mean, that is just so awful in so many different ways. But if these kids, as you say, that are doing it now, maybe had it done to them when they were kids, you have to wonder how long this stuff has been going on. And
There's a great quote from Colonel Jessup in A Few Good Men talking about close infantry training.
You want to ask me about code reds on the record, I tell you I discourage the practice in accordance with the commander's directive. Off the record, I tell you it is an invaluable part of close infantry training, and if it happens to go on without my knowledge, so be it.
So what the colonel is saying, who ended up being found guilty of being a criminal for inspiring violence against his own members of his own unit, but he's talking about the value of self-discipline within the groups. I used to have a guy on my volleyball team, an older kid, push on my back while I was stretching my hamstrings, saying, push it until it burns. I didn't really like that, but I respect that as part of the discipline of the team to pursue physical excellence that, of course, I never reached, but that's what the goal of that was. He was not trying to be mean or unkind. He was trying to say, I'm the boss, I'm the captain, and you need to improve your flexibility. But that is so much different than this shower stall broom handle story that's disgusting. And I don't know where these children got their value system when they did not think it's time to say no to this.
The 6 boys arrested today have each been charged with assault, gang sexual assault, and sexual assault with a weapon.
okay, so here's the question. These kids are under the age of 18. Is there any chance at all that because of the incident that took place in what they did, is it possible, Adam, that they could be tried as adults?
I think it's technically possible, as the code would allow it in a case of aggravated sexual assault, but given their age, given the specific facts, there's nothing to suggest it wasn't more than this isolated incident, at least that we know of. I realistically don't see that happening.
I don't think it's an aggravated sexual assault. Because to be
No.
aggravated, it would have to be wounding or endangering life, and I don't see that. So
You don't think someone can be seriously injured from that, though?
seriously injured? Yes, I'm not sure they can be what's considered a wounding, and would have to actually be a wounding for it to be aggravated assault, not the risk of it.
Yeah, well, we don't know
So we
the
don't
medical
know
reports.
we don't
or
know
anything like that.
exactly what the injuries are here. What Adam was referring to is actually the Youth Criminal Justice Act. It enumerates 5 offenses for which you can be tried as an adult, and they're the most serious ones. So I don't think they'll be charged with aggravated sexual assault. But make no mistake about the trouble these boys are in for this conduct. They will be given. I would believe if the leaders of this caper, the ones who decided to do this, acquired the device and gave directions to others, they will find themselves under the supervision of the state, I would think, into their adulthood.
I was going to say, because the Young Offenders Act apparently clears your name by the time you turn 18.
Not
but
true, not
it-
true.
Okay,
It's-
so clear that up a
no.
little bit, because there is this misconception that if you commit a crime as a teenager, that once you turn 18, all is hunky dory and you go out into the world and live your life and be a very successful lawyer, doctor, whatever you want to be. Is there maybe not a record, but a reputation that goes along with this? You're always going to be the kid that did that, even when you're an adult.
And their probationary periods can cross into their adulthood depending on their age. The maximum probationary period for a youth is 2 years. We have what's called the Youth Criminal Justice Act. It's been the act since 2003. Between 1984 and 2003, it was called the Young Offenders Act, which is the years you came of age, Barry, which is why you called it that.
Yeah.
And previous to that was the Juvenile Delinquents Act. But so since 84, the age of criminal responsibility has been 12. Before that, it was 7. Then it went to 12 in 84. It's still 12 with the YCJA. And there is a complex series of laws about record keeping and expungement and retention of those records, but they certainly can cross over into your adult years.
There's obviously a certain amount of responsibility that has to be placed on the kids who did the act. Where does the responsibility lie with the parents? Should the parents not be accepting some responsibility for the way they've raised their kids, that they would do that? Because I know personally, I would never in my wildest dreams do something like that. And I can safely say that my 18-year-old son would never have done anything like that. It's just not in his DNA. It's not in his thought process. It's not in his moral beliefs that he would inflict that kind of pain or embarrassment on another human being. So where do the parents, can they be liable at all from the victims' families?
No, I don't think so. There was something called the Parental Responsibility Act that talked about parents paying for damages. Essentially, I think it was targeting mischief. It was passed by the Harris government. I've never heard much about it. It was essentially a Small Claims Act liability amendment that allowed you to go after parents for damages caused, not in the criminal law. No, there's also the Child and Family Services Act and the Children's Law Reform Act that talk about the duty to report conduct, that the conduct of the child can inform whether or not they're best suited to be with their parents. Like that can be, the child's behavior can be relevant to custody and access.
Well, yeah.
But these aren't divorce proceedings as far as we know going on. So those sorts of things aren't going to come into play. These are also affluent families, so those children aren't on the radar in my cynical view about where the child services agencies go looking for children in need of protection. But you can have a kid in private school who's really messed up, even though he comes from very good parents. And I wonder what's going on here with the lack of judgment and lack of values on the perpetrators of this.
We're also, I do think don't want to jump to conclusions about parents, as I know from years of practicing criminal law, sometimes people that have relatively good normal families get themselves in trouble. So everybody wants to start casting blame and pointing fingers, but the reality is a lot of these kids, frankly, some of them might just be good kids who somehow got wrapped up in this element of peer pressure and became perpetrators. But we're also jumping to these conclusions that these parents are bad and raised them wrong, and I don't think we're quite at the point where we should go there.
It's just hard to fathom. It really is. And
We in our locker rooms, I spent a lot of time in basketball locker rooms, and there probably wasn't a day that someone didn't say something gross or talk about what they were going to do to their girlfriend. That
hey,
was
I was bullied in
and
locker rooms as a kid, but
and
not like this.
jokes about who's in puberty and who's
Yeah.
got big junk and not and whatnot, and that's common. My brothers both went to private school, and they went to St. Andrews College and have only good things to say. Have no reports of any abuse or any kind of violence being done to anyone. They never had any stories of that, but they did have stories about kind of a culture of privacy and secrets among the boys' teams, that they would be, masturbate on the bus on the way to hockey tournaments, for instance, in front of each other. And that's a line of privacy that I never thought to cross at camp or on camping trips, out trips, and in locker rooms. It never came across my mind, but you hear stories about hockey teams, circle jerks and whatnot. I don't know if they're even true, but these legends of that sort of that closeness and that camaraderie manifesting itself in really being sexually lacking privacy.
What the hell is
And
wrong with
I-
our
I
society?
don't
that
know.
A kid that wants to play sports
Yeah.
has to be subjected to something
is
like
this
this.
a sports team thing though, or
There was
or
a-
a private school thing?
or
Well,
a societal thing.
Well, the private school question, Adam, is a good one, but the private school, the St. Mike's response was, "Oh, this is the first we've heard of this," and there was a lot of alumni, some with their back to the camera. One guy even had his voice changed, but I think it was the CBC, saying, "Baloney, you've known about this for a long time. There's nothing new under the sun here," and they called out their own alma mater, St. Mike's, on it. I can't quote them, and I don't want to cast aspersions on St. Mike's at large over the last 50 years it's been around.
It's happening there.
But-
You have to think that that's not the only school in the world where this kind of act happens.
Well, remember the thing that disbanded the Canadian Airborne in 1995 was hazing using KKK etchings into the body and feces and guys walking around wearing only soiled toilet paper. It was awful. But it was apparently a long-standing tradition of, I guess there's something to be said, or some theory, that if you break someone down and make them grovel to become part of something, and break them down and then build them back up again, that weird sort of battering of a person's spirit and then bringing them back into the fold and saying, "You're one of us now," creates some kind of cohesion.
Loyalty. It's building
Yeah,
loyalty.
loyalty, cohesion, secrets.
Well, you saw it in the 50s in fraternities and colleges that you had to go through some certain ritual to be part of that fraternity. But again, there is a line in that. And this line was clearly not only crossed, but stomped over. And, you talk about responsibilities, and Principal Greg Reeves and the school president, Father Jefferson Thompson, both stepped down. Now, I believe they stepped down on their own accord, but you have to think that there was a lot of pressure coming at them to do this. And one of the reasons why was because they had this video and they waited, I think, 48 hours before they turned it over to the police.
I know I'm being criticized for that, but I've spoken with the victims' parents. They are very pleased with the timeline.
Now, their reasonings were they wanted to, let the families know before it became public. But here lies another area on people that knew that should be held accountable in some way. And you'd have to think that the president and the principal of the school, they have to hold some kind, like going down with the ship. The captain has to go down.
I had the exact same situation happen with a video that surfaced of two boys and a girl in a locker room in a threesome that was videotaped and got out and was sent around on MSN or one of the Snapchats or something. And a history teacher that was well liked and had a good rapport with the students heard about it and said, "Let's bring everyone in and try to mediate this." Didn't report it to the school administration, the leadership. Tried to deal with it on his own, which might have come from a place of good-heartedness and harmony, but he was fired and chastised completely by the police and the Crown Attorney when I dealt with them eventually. The girl alleged that she'd been videotaped inappropriately. She's under 18. She didn't know, so it's a voyeurism aspect to it, and part of it was also alleged to be a sexual assault. So it became a criminal case. But this teacher's inability to make it a police matter right away, which I don't know how you can't see things are police matters. They're not. These aren't just school discipline. There's lines that are crossed that.
Or a family services matter. Teachers are mandated reporters. They need to call Children's Aid or Catholic Children's Aid or whatever the appropriate society would have been.
If your child trashes their ankle in a groundhog hole when they're playing in a pickup soccer or something, and you don't call the parents within an hour, you'd be in big trouble. And that's
Yeah, that's
nothing.
actually that's a brilliant comparison. There's certain things that you
just
call parents about.
Yeah.
You might not for a scraped knee or something like
but a
that,
scraped
but
knee
yeah,
or
for
it's an
anything
actual
serious
injury.
and
Yeah.
There's one other area on this that we haven't touched on, and that is those who actually videotaped the incident and made it public.
We are very concerned about the distribution of the videos on social media. The unintended consequences are far-reaching and detrimental to the recovery of the victim. I cannot stress to you the importance of ensuring that these videos are immediately deleted from all phones or devices in your possession. Failure to do so and/or the continued distribution or publishing of these videos will be treated very seriously.
Videotaping the incident in its own could have been actually the thing that has stopped this incident from happening and brought out the dirt. And had the kids videotape the incident for that reason, okay, I've got evidence now. This is awful. I don't believe this should be happening. I'm going to videotape this. I'm going to give it to the principal, hand it over to the police. That's one thing. But you videotape it and throw it out to the world as almost, hey, guys, check this out. Adam, is there anything that, even if the kids who videotaped it weren't involved in the actual ritual or assault, is there some kind of liability for being the one that put this garbage out on the internet?
well, it's somewhat ironic in that I doubt they were videotaping it from a good place.
Right.
But the reality is now there's fantastic evidence that can be used. And we see this in our practice now, that a lot of things that might have gotten swept on the rug in the past, issues with police and police brutality being a perfect example, that when the cops say, oh, that never happened, everybody believes them. And now videos come out that prove otherwise, that it's a great form of evidence. But the passing around of the video, a couple issues there. One, underage people, so it's
Child
pornography.
Sure it is.
The other, there was new legislation or an amendments to the criminal code. I think passed by the Harper government. Scott can correct me. He's good at that. That it's about passing intimate imagery, and we often see this when if you send somebody a nude pic and then the relationship gets broken up and they start sending it out.
Porn.
Revenge porn is what it's often called. You can go to jail for that, even in the context of just passing out these pictures amongst each other, in pictures that were consensually sent to each other. And here, every kid who possessed and sent that video is liable criminally.
Be careful, Adam, and make it clear, because Barry's question was really good. Sent it with the state of mind of sharing with randoms.
Yes.
Because Barry's question was, could there be an altruistic motive? And I agree with you. It's tempting to think that wasn't the reason for the videotape.
Mm-hmm.
But it should be understood that there are, so as much as the images constitute child pornography, there are exceptions to what makes it a crime. If it's for a legitimate scientific purpose, for instance, a textbook that shows genitals, for instance, of a child that's, dermatology or showing about child development, or that's not a child pornography. Justice purposes, police having it is not a crime. Art, there's an art exception for child pornography as well. So in this case, it would squarely
Art
fit into-
exception being not necessarily pictures of naked children, just drawings and things like that.
It could be. There's
I'd be a little careful on the
Well, there's
art
sort of there's
exception.
the cherubs and there's the copper tone kid on the beach that are considered to be only artistic, not for a
Yes,
sexual purpose.
The peeing kid in Brussels, for example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those sort of images are not child pornography. And if it's for a justice purpose, it would not. So anyone who has something like this, if one of our listeners hypothetically has children that are seeing things and they're going to surreptitiously videotape them to bring abuse to someone's attention, they don't have to worry about their own liability, Adam. As long as their state of mind is this is for the purpose of.
Oh yeah, and somebody who happened to receive the video and didn't know what they were getting and didn't pass it on, can't see them being prosecuted for possessing child pornography,
It's
especially if
happened,
they
but
deleted
it's
it right
happened.
away.
No, they should share it with an
an
adult
authority or
an
their parents,
authority.
absolutely.
Yes. And say, look, I see something that needs to be reported. This is really wrong. And I'm not talking about mooning and swearing and even sort of streaking type goofy stuff. There's a line here that I don't know where you started the conversation, Adam, was saying, where's the line? I don't think any question that when you hurt somebody who's trying to get away, so you have to hold them down, that's completely inappropriate.
We have talked about pretty much every aspect of this except for the victims. And the victims, we're talking about a number of young boys that may never live their lives the same way because of what they went through. And again, how many others are out there that have gone through this and it wasn't videotaped and sent to the police and it wasn't, even revealed, and they're just going through the motions. And as we talked about, these kids that committed this may have had this done to them when they were, just breaking into the football team as well. So
the dignity of the victim here has to be protected very carefully because you can't have these things stay in the shadows. Some of the parents were screaming at members of, I think it was Global.
Blaming the media.
Yeah, media, get out of here. Media has a bit of a dirty business to do to shine a light on these areas, but enough's enough. It has to happen. If you just don't report these things and say boys will be boys, as ridiculous a phrase as that is, things aren't going to change. So kudos to the media.
Some of the tweets towards the media, some of the pictures that were going on, it was scary stuff.
There was assaults, really, when you think about it. Camera people pushed down and being verbally condemned by parents.
And I can appreciate some of these parents wanting their kids to go to school without media helicopters and the media sticking cameras in their face. But a lot of the parents expressing concern for the media was their concern. There was no concern for the victims.
People love to talk about lurking sexual predators in our midst being a danger. They are not statistically significant compared to unreported sexual assaults happening in our homes, our sports teams, our churches. So you have to shine a light into these dark areas. That's where abuse is happening, not in the bushes, not at the bus stop, that everyone likes to talk about.
How
It's
sad
just
it is
not.
that the three places you just mentioned should be the three safest places a person could
And
ever
they
be.
are the safest, and they're also the most private, which allows predators to flourish. And that's why it happens.
Adam?
You can't go around the mall parking lot grabbing asses very long. You can do it for about 20 minutes. You can perpetuate abuse in churches and sports teams for decades. And that's why you need to speak out, protect the victims and their dignity so that the next guy doesn't feel like his life is going to be turned upside down and lose all his friends like I'm sure this guy feels. And that's really important that happen.
Even in prison, there's one thing that you always hear that criminals cannot tolerate, and that is people that do this type of thing. Now, you've got 6 boys, and I call them boys because they're not adults. In the eyes of the law, because of their age and because there's been no court date yet, what happens to these kids? Do they just go back to just being at home and living at home? Obviously, you have to think that they could be in danger of somebody else going after them for what they've done. And as we talked about before, the revenge type of crimes. Adam, what happens with kids when they are charged with something as severe as this?
The media can't publish their names.
Or anything that tends to identify.
Or
But
anything
people
that
do know their names. Those videos are out there.
People will absolutely know their names, and people could go to court and find out their names.
These are public court hearings, by the way.
Yeah. But their names can never be published. So
But they're not held. They're not held in a cell or anything like that until the court date.
Well,
No,
Presumably-
presumably they're on bail.
Yeah, they all got bail, I would presume.
Do we know any of their lawyers, Adam? Do we know?
I don't know if anybody's come out and said they're representing them quite yet. I think they all probably went to 311 Jarvis and got out in consent, as they should have.
Or released from the police.
Yeah.
As criminal lawyers yourself, would you guys be apprehensive to take on a case like this? Because
No, not at all. These kids that did it as well are, in a way, victims of a culture. There has to be some other explanation here. There's no way there are 6 dyed-in-the-wool sex predators on the same team. It's just not statistically likely. This is something that got out of control, and their story needs to be heard too, and their personal circumstances, their moral blameworthiness needs to be properly understood, and you can only do that with good, responsible counsel. So, of course, we would help them get through this. This is going to be a huge stain on them.
They're going to be adults in our society, and
Yes.
I hope these kids get some help, and I hope our system is able to help them. We can't go out looking for vigilante justice and just want to punish these kids for what they did. We have a justice system that, especially under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, that focuses on rehabilitation, and hopefully these kids will get that.
Well, as we wrap up here, gentlemen, just final word, and speaking from the mind of a parent, not a lawyer, and an adult in this society, how concerning is this that this is not the only thing that we're going to find out? And again, I'm not asking for professional opinion here. I'm asking for a personal opinion on just how worrisome this could be.
As a parent, pretty much, I mean, I do this work, right? I hear about people hurting each other sexually and not keeping their hands to themselves, to put it mildly. Ever since my kids could understand me, when they were in the bath, I talked about them washing themselves and no one else touches you there, and you don't touch anyone else there from a very early age. And we had little jokes about it and a little light moments to explain, this is your area, and you get the soap and you wash it yourself. And I did that every single day with them to put in their heads that you keep your hands to yourself and that certain things are boundaries. And if someone's going around punching someone in the arm or pushing someone into puddles, well, these things might happen. But in certain areas, your junk, your private stuff is a special boundary protected area. And I don't think that happened with these kids, or they went astray somewhere. I'm sorry, someone really dropped the ball teaching these kids about personal dignity, and I'm disappointed in whoever led to this happening.
Final thoughts, Adam?
I hear what Scott's saying, and that very well might be the truth, but I also think there might have just been a gang mentality that went on here, and a lot of these kids might have gotten those lessons. But we had all these group of teenagers together, and they got excitable, and something went wrong. And if you look at the brain studies about teenagers, and I joke with people that have teens, and they have brain damage. And the good news is it's brain damage that they'll grow out of, but their brains are not properly formed. And that's why we have the YCJA. And I think there was likely this gang mentality that happened here.
Well, as we close out, and it just another reminder for kids, for parents, anyone listening, I mean, this is not stuff that you keep to yourself. If anything like this ever happens to you or someone you have to report it, because the longer people keep this inside, the longer people keep this a secret, the longer it's going to continue to go on. We have to make sure that, this type of horrendous hazing stops real soon, because it's pretty sickening as a parent in this world to see that this kind of stuff is still going on.